Welcome to Public Health on Call, a podcast from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, where we bring evidence, experience, and perspective to make sense of today's leading health challenges. If you have questions or ideas for us, please send an email to publichealthquestion@jhu.edu. That's publichealthquestion@jhu.edu for future podcast episodes.
This is Lindsay Smith Rogers. We all know cigarettes are bad for our health. Today, Stephanie Desmond talks to Grazi Grillo, a scientist at the Institute of Global Tobacco Control at Johns Hopkins, about how cigarette waste, notably cigarette butts and filters, are also bad for the environment. They discuss what can be done to reduce this type of pollution. Let's listen.
Grazi Grillo, thanks so much for joining me.
Hi, Stephanie. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
So today we're going to talk about something I think that we see everywhere, but we don't really think a whole lot about, and that is tobacco litter and the environment. And I understand that cigarette butts are the most littered objects in the world. So you're saying that the biggest amount of waste comes from tobacco cigarette butts?
Yes, Stephanie, that's correct. It is estimated that about 5.5 trillion cigarettes are produced annually around the world. And of that amount, 4.5 trillion butts are discarded inappropriately. And it's important to highlight that they stay with us forever. And they are the most common form of litter found, including beach cleanups around the world. And their material, the filter, the packaging, they all end up later in our soil and affect our waterways, among others.
That's just a really staggering number to hear that. I didn't even know that 5.5 trillion cigarettes were produced annually. But let's talk about why you're concerned about cigarette butts as litter. I imagine they contain bad chemicals and microplastics. I wonder if you could talk me through what the danger is.
Yes, that is correct. So the cigarette butts, they contain thousands of potentially toxic substances, such as metals, hydrocarbons, nitrogen compounds, aromatic amines, among other substances. And also they are non-biodegradable. The filter specifically contains single-use plastic, and we know that plastic does not biodegrade in the environment. So like I mentioned, all these toxic substances and the plastic remains in the environment and can contaminate our soils and our waterways as well.
So the concern about, for plastic purposes, it's the cigarette filter, I guess, that has the plastic in it. Explain to those of us who are not familiar what the cigarette filter is and why it exists.
That's a great question. So cigarette filters were introduced a long time ago by the tobacco industry. And they basically are a filter in the cigarette, which contains several substances, and they are technically sold as a way of filtering the substance that come from the tobacco. So with this idea that it would be a little bit safer to smoke cigarettes with filter. But after many, many years of research around the tobacco industry, and the filter itself, it has been proven now that the filter does not make cigarettes any safer. So it ends up being just a marketing tool for the tobacco industry and a way of having all these different substances, including flavors in the filter, and change the experience of the user throughout the smoking process.
So it's not a necessary part of the cigarette, in your opinion?
Yes, that's correct. And if, as a matter of fact, now there has been more and more discussions from countries and jurisdictions planning to ban cigarette filters on cigarettes because they don't bring any benefit, if I can say that. And moreover, they cause a huge environmental problem.
Yeah, I mean, I've never even thought of this before. It's fascinating. So you did some research on this. Tell me what you've learned.
Yes, so we have two different research on cigarette butts and moreover on tobacco waste. The first one, we conduct an observational study in India. That means that we went to 9 cities across India and we walked through urban areas and we count how many different tobacco product waste we saw in the streets. So that included cigarette butts, but also smokeless tobacco packaging, which is very common in India. Like people in India use more smokeless tobacco products than cigarette. Also, beady butts and packaging, and the cigarette pack itself. And what we found is that tobacco litter is everywhere. We found over 17,000 pieces of tobacco litter in India, and most of them were smokeless tobacco packaging. But even in India, where about 4% of the population smokes cigarettes, cigarette butts was the second most found type of litter. So that was very fascinating for us and like staggering to see the impact of cigarette butts even when the prevalence of smoking cigarettes is lower.
So the smokeless tobacco packaging, that's plastic as well?
Yes, most of them is plastic too. And we conduct another study in Brazil in which we focused in a coastal city in the state of São Paulo. And we collect, in this case, discarded cigarette butts in urban areas. And we basically found 1 cigarette butt for every 5 square meters of area that we collect the butts. So yeah, it was very impressive in both studies, the amount of cigarette butts and tobacco product waste in general. And in the specific case of the Brazilian study, we assessed the environmental impact of the cigarette butts. So there is something that is called the cigarette butt pollution index that accounts for how the filter, not the cigarette butts, affect the environment and considers the type of soil, how much rain it has in the area. And what we found was a severe pollution in the city that we conducted this study. So very concerning findings there as well.
So what does this tell you?
It tells that we need to have measures to address tobacco litter for sure. We need to pay attention to this issue, which is not only an issue related to the impact that we already know about the cigarettes, but as you were telling in the beginning, it's not something that people are very aware. And we need to, including bridge movements and efforts with environmental agencies working to address the issues related to tobacco litter and the impact that they have in the environment. And if I may add something that was interesting, in both studies, we were able to observe tobacco marketing on the tobacco product waste. So we were able to easily identify the brands of the tobacco products that we were collecting or observing. And that means that also people who don't smoke are exposed to another form of tobacco marketing, which might help to make tobacco use more acceptable, and especially among young people, that you don't even smoke, but like you said, you walk around the streets and you see the cigarette butt, and that might help to become just a normal use in their lives.
So are you suggesting that on top of this, that cigarette makers should remove their branding from cigarettes, like from the individual cigarettes themselves, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that is correct. There is a policy that is called Plan and Standardized Packaging, which plans to remove all types of visual branding, so colors and logos from cigarette packs. But beside the cigarette pack itself or any type of tobacco packaging, it would be important to consider the cigarette stick and remove all the marketing features from it as well. Say, as a way of stopping this extra form of tobacco advertising, which we know really helps to normalize tobacco use.
Am I really going to see a butt on the street and think, oh, I should smoke a Marlboro?
Maybe. I'm not sure. Maybe not you, but it is another form of advertising. And even if you don't think about smoking it, you might just find that it's okay to smoke and be okay with other people smoking around you too.
So what should be done here?
That's a great question. And we have several different policies that we can think of. And including, it's very important to share that the city of Baltimore recently filed a lawsuit against tobacco companies based on the public cost to clean up the streets results from tobacco products. So there are more and more initiatives to address the issue of the tobacco litter itself. This is one. The city of San Francisco also has a litter abatement fee. So the cost of cigarette has an extra $1 per pack, which goes directly for cleanup initiatives of the streets as well. But again, on top of thinking of these measures that focus more on cleanup, we really need to keep working to reduce the demand of tobacco use. And we have several known policies like smoke-free environments, banning of tobacco advertising, promotion, and sponsorship, as well as offering ways of quitting smoking as ways to really diminish the interest and the demand for tobacco products, which will consequently diminish the tobacco product waste that is generated.
So there's also a movement underway, I guess, to really think about this litter, right? I understand the WHO recently made some moves.
Yes, you are correct. Thanks for bringing that up too. Early in February, there was a conference of the parties who are part of the Framework Convention for Tobacco Control, which contains measures, like some of these measures that I just mentioned to you, to reduce the tobacco demand and production. And there is now a very clear effort to protect against the harms, environmental harms from tobacco beyond the tobacco cultivation, but also thinking about these after effects of the waste they create, and specifically thinking about the plastic pollution that is a result of cigarette filters and other packaging materials as well. So yes, it's very exciting to see more and more now governments thinking about the environmental impact and ways to support measures that will address it. And it's very interesting here, let me share with you that Brazil was the country who supported this initiative during this conference, and they were informed and they saw the results of our study conducted in Brazil, which really helped the delegation and the government people who were there to think through and present this initiative and get the support from other countries.
So I guess the message here is cigarettes are not just bad for your health, but they're really bad for the environment too.
Yes, I think that's a great way to to really resume everything that we talked about it.
Grazi Grillo, thank you so much for joining.
Yes. Thanks, Stephanie, for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this such important topic, which I'm just passionate about it. So thank you.
Public Health on Call is a podcast from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, produced by Joshua Sharfstein, Lindsay Smith-Rogers, Stephanie Desmond, and Grace Ceciri. Audio production by J.B. Arbogast, Holly Cardinale, Spencer Greer, Matthew Martin, and Philip Porter, with support from Chip Hickey. Distribution by Nick Moran. Production support from Catherine Ricardo. Social media run by Grace Ceciri and Eliza Rosen. If you have questions or ideas for us, please send an email to publichealthquestion@jhu.edu. That's publichealthquestion@jhu.edu for future podcast episodes. Thank you for listening.